This is the 5-minute podcast review dropping Saturday, August the 3rd, 2019. This episode, I've got 3 new podcasts you might be interested in, but remember, there's hundreds in the back episodes if you're looking for listening ideas. You don't actually have to listen to all my back episodes, just click the link on your screen and go to the show notes where you can visually scroll all the back episodes with clickable links that'll take you to each of the hundreds of podcasts I've already covered. Just click on the show notes link, the one on your screen, and you'll see what I mean. Anyhow, let me now add 3 more podcasts to the pile. I'll start with Spectacular Failures, which is pretty much as the name suggests, stories of spectacular failures in the corporate world. Like Jim and Tammy Faye Baker's Christian theme park disaster, or Kodak missing the digital camera revolution despite actually inventing the digital camera. And that story, which I think many of us have heard simplified versions of, is in reality a bit more complicated than the cardboard cutout idea that Kodak, with its roots in film, just simply couldn't believe in digital. You have to listen to the episode anyhow to hear the full story on that. And speaking of episodes, they're only a snappy 30 minutes each, with, I think, about 8 up at the moment. That's Spectacular Failures. It's worth checking out, and the easiest way to do that, from here at least, is to use the link I've put on your screen. So, rolling on with the theme of failure takes us to the next podcast suggestion called The Worst Sitcom Ever. This is an 8-episode series, and it's kind of like a post-mortem on a New Zealand-produced sitcom called Melody Rules. Google Melody Rules, by the way, and the first thing that comes up is the Wikipedia listing confirming it as one of the worst sitcoms ever. So the host of the worst sitcom ever made is one of the creators of the sitcom, Jeff Houtman, and it sounds like he hasn't had a hell of a lot of work since, at least not in TV, and this is his way of trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Across the 8 episodes, he talks to a wide range of people involved in the production, from fellow writers to actors and network executives. I'm still only halfway through the series, but I think it's worth a listen. My only tip would be to skip the overly long 5 or 6 minute setup in episode 1. So that's The Worst Sitcom Ever Made, and again, you'll find the link to it on your screen. Okay, enough with failure. The final podcast for this episode, one worth checking out, is called Interview. At one level, Interview is the audio from the television interview series of the same name, but it's cleverly adapted to the podcast format by the host Andrew Denton. For instance, there are setups at the start of the podcast explaining the background to how the interview we're about to hear came about and the things that happened backstage and after the interview, including sometimes the host's own critique of how he felt the interview went. It's worth mentioning, because I know most people listening to this podcast are not in Australia, that Interview is Australian, but it's relevant beyond just an Australian audience. Certainly you'll hear plenty of Australian interviewees, but many of them are well known internationally. People like the actors Guy Pearce, Jackie Weaver, or world champion surfer Mick Fanning. And Denton also interviews plenty of global celebrities, including Cher, Madonna, Lily Allen and Michael Caine, just to name some of them. Andrew Denton is well known in Australia for getting his interview subjects to really open up, and I think that's what makes Interview worth having a listen to. Overall, it's a clever approach to adapting TV audio to a podcast format. And that's it for another episode. This time we looked at Spectacular Failures, The Worst Sitcom Ever Made, and Interview. They're all easy to find using the links on your screen, and don't forget the show notes link to check out the hundreds of other podcasts covered in earlier episodes. Speak to you again soon in the next episode.